Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull, and I have to laugh. I just did a huge video and forgot to record it. I laugh about that. It ended up being on the theme of UNESCO in actual fact, and I sort of realised that the United States and Israel had opted out. And I had a really wonderful compilation this video was all about. It was really, I'll just allow a flow actually to happen now in respect of that. I saw that when we no longer want peace education, we don't want education for peace in the world, the person who you're in conflict with will not want for you the peace. Whereas when you're a peacemaker, you want the peace for the other. You want them to find peace. You want them to be happy. You want to be in a space where if there's a problem or a conflict, you can resolve it. I always remember Edward de Bono. He was one of the top 50 thinkers, pardon me, in the world. I ended up going to his conference and I met him and we talked. But what he was really introducing to the world was lateral thinking, creative thinking, that one can solve any problem. The use of violence is, in my opinion, coming from quite a primitive space in the sense that we frighten that other into conforming. It's very much a totalitarian viewpoint. And of course, within lines of control, people do as they're told and they're taught not to think. Do we want a world in that image would be the question for humanity. Or do we want a world that evolves itself beyond a war mentality into one where we take full responsibility for our negative thinking and that we learn to step across the room toward the other with great courage? And rather than fighting them, the courage is in facing them. Can we find that humility? And the words, "the meek will inherit the earth," come up in my mind. Can we find within ourselves the humility to disarm? It was Scott Ritter who said in one of his speeches, he was the former UN inspector, he was a CIA operative. I remember seeing him at the University of Melbourne. And it was him that said that he considered the peacemakers, the pacifists, as having the most courage because they were unarmed. He was right. They didn't wish to harm the other. That's why they're unarmed. They don't want you to be hurt. So they may use methods like protest or, protective accompaniment if somebody looks like they might be harassed or maybe in danger for speaking up. These are the whistleblowers, the ones who speak up. The peacemakers will come alongside and ensure their safety. We are here for the well-being of humanity. We see ourselves in you. There's aspects of me that's still at war. How can I dislike you? I can't. You're a part of me and I'm a part of you. I'm that peace within you that you deny, you see. We humans, from a consciousness point of view, we're all one. We're all aspects of each other. And we tend to befriend those who think the most like us. Yet wouldn't it be interesting if we could befriend those who are the most different from us? Because that's where the great learning comes from, is in facing the other that's very divergent from you. So from a peace point of view, my opposite number would be the one who's into violence. So I guess that's why, peacemakers and military often attract. Their opposite numbers attract. And you'll find very logical thinkers and creative thinkers attract. Opposites attract. It's really fascinating because on an unconscious level, there's something we're learning from one another. And I know I've been interested to learn about control and power over others. I've been fascinated by that because it's very different from me. I don't have any desire to control anyone. And so when I see someone exhibiting that type of behavior, I wonder why. Because sensitively, I can see that the other person they're controlling is suffering. And one of my big questions, of course, in my own life has been, how can one harm another you know, deliberately, and feel nothing. And I came to understand it was emotional disconnection. And then I came to realize it's come from childhood, it's come from patriarchy, it's come from mindsets that believe that feeling is weak, you know, that we're here to put on a bravado mask, if you like, to scare the other away. But coming back full circle, the world is changing and the climate is changing. And I've just read a poem I've recorded just now on that. The climate change and the human condition are one. You know, how we change, the climate changes because we're one with the planet. See, people think we're all separate. We live in little houses and we think we're separate from the natural world, but we're actually all connected energetically. It's quite fascinating when you start to explore this. So going back to UNESCO, that's the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organisation, and they have had decades of peace, sustainability. They're actually an amazing organisation which is under threat at the moment. The US pulled out and Israel pulled out, which was very noteworthy. And I saw the great fear in those who actually don't want peace, and then I saw the arms industry behind it. Seems to be coming to me a lot lately, the arms industry. And the profit that it's making, it's not defending anymore, it's business. And that's what Eisenhower was saying was the big problem that we're facing. And I've said that in another video as well. However, the planet is shifting. We are moving in a way that is questioning the old paradigm. And the truth of the matter is that the old paradigm is going to collapse, and it is collapsing right now. So I guess for those who are still moving along that trajectory, it's going to get harder and harder for you. And I would want you to have peace inside yourself. See, peace is not a them and us. It's not a war or peace scenario. It's about being at peace with where you are, no matter who you are. Peace doesn't belong to anybody or any person. It's a birthright. You're born with it. And when the thinking stops and you go into a still place, you will actually feel the peace. You are the peace. So when you look at the peacemakers and you see a threat or you see whatever, that's just an aspect of you that's not at peace, looking out at that other. There is no enemies in this world. Only the mind make it so. And in fact, going back to Israel, one of the greatest Jews was, of course, Jesus. And he brought that message to that part of the world, I think, for this time, to remind people in this part of the world that love is your answer. It's not a wishy-washy term, it's actually the answer. And all it is you moving from here to the heart. And I know that the Jewish people are very beautiful. I've got friends who are Jewish. I just met a lady the other day who was Jewish, became a friend. I love the culture. I love the Palestinians as well. I've met quite a few, very beautiful, very moderate they are. They're very beautiful people. But they're suffering enormously and also mirroring elements in their society, mirroring violence, as are, you know, the expectation in Israel for people to join the military. They become militarized because you believe that's where your security arises from, and I understand that you feel that way. However, what we resist persists, what we look at disappears. There have been clues given to the Jewish people about that higher power. I remember the years of the kibbutzes. These were wonderful communities, very advanced, and the incredible work of greening the desert. I mean, this is environmental. This actually gave hope, I think. You know, here in Australia, we could have mirrored what the Israelis did. But then there's the other aspect, which is the fear aspect, which is where the militaries come from, and the great funding of Israel by the United States to protect, their interests. But what if the real interest was in seeing yourself in the other? What if the test of this time is about moving away from force, moving away from control into allowance? What if that Jew 2,000 years ago was trying to teach you today that your freedom rests in giving freedom to others? Your bondage comes from, the bondage that you're inflicting on others. Your imprisonment. When you imprison another, you imprison yourself, you see. Because something within you knows that this is not in harmony with who you are because you're not happy. True happiness should be laughing and singing and dancing. That's what you do. But if you're not doing that, if you're very serious, you're strategizing all the time, constantly in the left brain, constantly monitoring for threats, not friends, then you're going to be in a heightened state of tension for a long time. And that's why conflicts become intractable. And of course, the injustice that other people will feel, they find it very hard to release from that injustice because they're not bad people in their mind. They feel they have rights and they're human, just as you are. I'm just pausing for a moment as I'm just going into the silence for a little bit. Of course, the conflict in the Middle East is mirroring the conflict everywhere. Whenever we see someone we don't like, whenever we abuse, whenever we bully, whenever we build walls to keep the other out. And of course, in my previous video, which I failed to record, it's funny, I'm back on this track again, it's fascinating. I saw the Wailing Wall and I could feel myself crying at the Wailing Wall with the others. And I felt their great pain at the walls that they've erected to keep that other out, to keep their family out, your cousins out. They're walls of your own making, darling. Whenever we shut down the heart, we create a wall. That's why Pink Floyd talked about another brick in the wall in their song. They talked about, the conforming sort of mentality and where it was leading people. In fact, their song is very much about controls. You should check it out. It's very good. Another Brick in the Wall is called, and it's all animation. The world is on a precipice of great change. We are moving into another way. The old paradigm is diminishing. Love is going to anchor and is anchoring actually on the planet. And it is the true seeing. It is indeed the truth that sets you free. You cannot unify the world without this very powerful sense of love. The love that you would feel for your mother or your father, your children. Imagine extending that out to others, treating them in the exact same way. Hopefully you treat them well. I'm talking about real love. We're one global family, and of course UNESCO has sought to bring that family together. And I guess if there are members of the family who don't want to join in, that's okay, you're still family. We will still love you, even if you decide to leave and even if you get more engaged in militarism, believing that's the highest security and the highest power. You're wrong. It's not. You're beautiful and powerful as you are when you tap into who you really are, you know. And some of the cultural themes that have arisen through history have been great expressions of that love, you know. And this is where you feel really at peace. So I just sort of felt to express that. I'm sitting in front of my laptop right now, and I've actually got a video in front of me called The Evolution of the Global Peace System. So it's the evolution of the global peace system. You might want to check it out on YouTube. I just happened to stop a frame at a nuclear explosion. And it's very orange, it's very bright, a lot of yellow. Now, you could almost think if you didn't know it was a nuclear explosion, you could say it looked very beautiful. But it's a firebomb, and this one I'm looking at, I think would be, I'm guessing, it's about 20 megatons. It's not, you know, this is where the splitting of the atom produced that 15,000 kilotons TNT equivalent. And of course, we've got bombs now at 100 million tons, and I know the Israelis have 200 nuclear weapons that have not been acknowledged, but they're there. And you haven't used them, which is good. And let's hope that stays that way. Let's hope you will disarm them at some point when you recognise your true security comes from making peace. You may not be ready for making peace right now, and I guess I accept that. I can only love you as a part of my family, my global family, until, I mean, that will never stop. It'll always be unconditional love for everyone. Everyone has to make their own choices, but I guess why I'm feeling so inspired to talk to Israel today, it's really interesting. This is not usual for me. I just felt an enormous sense of love to communicate this message, and you know, it includes Mossad too. This is inclusive of their security apparatus. What I said in my previous video, which I didn't record, was that my first book I read ever was actually on Mossad. So my first awakening was to the Secret Service in Israel and how brilliant it was at that time when I read about the story. And of course, I have a very strong connection to love-based teachings, which have also arisen from this place. And, you know, I'm aware of what's been done in order to maintain that security. And I guess that's why this video is being produced at this moment. Somehow it feels important to communicate to the Israelis. This is the Israeli regime, not the people themselves. I think the people themselves are very similar in mindset to Australian people as well. I know quite a few Israelis and they're really lovely. There's a great sense of culture in Israel, but there's also blind spots. And what I said in my last video, and I'll repeat it here, was when I taught peace, what I taught children was that there's a blind spot card. It's 2 dots on the card. You cover one of your eyes and you look at the other dot. Now, this second dot disappears. And what I was telling kids is when you think you're right, you can't see the other side. You just can't. You're so fixated on what you believe to be true. And if you're in a mindset that does not embrace or invite different viewpoints, if you need to hold that thought without question, you will not be able to see the other side, literally. So the true nature of the democratic discourse, this is when we're really being democratic and not pretending to be, is a willingness to allow others to have their say and to find ways to coexist with that other. And what happens is we actually learn from that other, because always, whoever comes into your reality is there at your invitation. Now, this is on a higher level I'm speaking. They're there at your invitation by thought. You've attracted them in. That's why you can never destroy an enemy. The more you think about them, the more you create them. This is the law of attraction. This is actually what needed to be said in my previous video. No wonder it didn't record. Very important you understand this. What you think about, you bring about. You keep focusing on the other as the enemy, you will lock them in place in that way. And I say it energetically because we're all energy. Let me explain energy. You walk into a room, you can feel the mood of the room. They might be tense. They might be happy. It could be a party. You definitely feel the energy as you walk in the room. That's what I mean about energetic. Then we might see someone, you go, oh, I'm really interested in that person. Something drew me to that person. It's an attraction. Part of your life journey is to have that connection. So the life is not just unfolding in respect of the narratives we've all been taught as children. The life is unfolding because there are things you're here to learn. And I would say, for those in the Israeli hierarchy, you're here to learn peace. It's no mistake you've been born in the Holy Land, so to speak. You're here to learn peace. And you're in the position of military. You're having to go through the experience of oppressing others as your people have been oppressed in the past. So for some reason, you're repeating out the same sort of energy that was done to your own people. The question is, what have you learned from the experience of the oppressor? Because you've done that. But you might feel oppressed by others. There might be others that you've felt, even in the current time, that you've really, felt kind of forced. And I guess from the Palestinian side, that to accept differences as well. These are the cousins. You're the cousins. And I'm not kissing cousins anymore. You put big walls up. The Wailing Walls have been put up. So they too are here. They're experiencing the reality of the oppressed. So I wonder in historical records where they've been the oppressor as well. Their experience this imbalance of power. Powerlessness has been the lesson learned from the Palestinian side. So the word Allah obviously comes into my mind as I'm feeling for the Palestinians. Okay, God is great. Okay, what is God? Is it love? Their challenge is to learn to love you. You need to learn to love the Israelis. Despite what they do, they know not what they do, was a famous statement. Can you look beyond the oppressor into the heart of the innocence of that other? And you can turn that around. Can you, as the oppressor, look into the heart of that other and see yourself? You're oppressing an aspect of yourself which is powerless. You feel powerless. You're both feeling the same thing, powerlessness, but you're doing it through a masculine projective force, and they are finding other ways to attack back because they feel their masculine, their identity is being, they feel they have to take revenge as an honor. It's not true, of course. There's no honor in killing, and it just perpetuates the problem. Peace in the Middle East. There will be peace in the Middle East. I can feel that. You have to question your thinking. The words coming to me is, we want peace for you. We want to see you singing and dancing. You cannot maintain the oasis of a pretense of a democratic society unless you live it. And your society actually was communal. And the beautiful Palestinians are communal as well. They're very similar but different. Yeah, there are natural limits on the earth. We've actually what's the word? Moved beyond tipping points. There's tipping points. Traversed tipping points might be the word. Climatically. Planet's going to shift you one way or another. You're going to get shifted. Could be a rise in sea level. Could be an axis shift. Could be something. Polar reversal. Something's... Yeah, the climate we're seeing is already changing. And we're seeing it changing in massive ways. So it is going to evoke a shift in consciousness for you as well. Question is how to prepare for the changes that are coming. You can keep continuing to focus on maintaining the military, but that's not going to assist you. Well, the militaries could assist in terms of rebuilding, but that could be a great service. They could become, more service-oriented to humanity, which would be great. The New Earth Army talked about that as the militaries having the potential for the greatest peace on earth, actually. That was Men That Stare at Goats. You might want to look at that. George Clooney starred in that film, but it was based on a real military guy who ushered in the New Earth Army. He created the New Earth Army. Ronald Reagan actually was in support of this unit, special unit that were tasked with preventing violence. It's probably one of the first in the world. And this was, within the US military. I really love that. And it's really funny in the film, this special unit sitting there on a table and they're all juicing away, drinking healthy fruit drinks. And then you've got the other soldiers at the other tables who are eating up, bacon, eggs, whatever they eat. And these guys were meditating, so they're going still. New Earth Army going still. Israeli Defense Force going still. Coming into contact with their own turmoil, which reflects into the outer world. Because the inner world is the outer world. What you feel inside projects outward. That's how this really works. So they became one with life, was what this New Earth Army worked on. And they developed what they called superpowers and super soldiers. Now, rather than having 200 nuclear weapons, you could have real superpowers. Same with the Palestinians. This is for everyone, of course, as it's a global agora I'm sitting in. So the superpowers, they were doing remote viewing. They were able to, isn't it amazing they can do that? They were able to find someone that was lost in some country by remote viewing. They were doing it in a way that there's no separation. There was no walls, nothing. In fact, one of the guys, he could actually move through a wall as well. So he changed his molecular structure through meditation. And they said this is a true story in the film. And he actually moved through a wall. But again, that idea of you cannot thread, what is it? The camel through the eye of a needle. This is to do with the kingdom of heaven. I can feel that's a biblical terminology. So in other words, you cannot have these superpowers whilst you maintain a negative mindset, whilst you believe that force and control will bring you power. It doesn't. It's actually the seed of your own demise is what it creates, because what you put out comes back. It's a universal law. So these soldiers had to become very loving. They had to really come into attunement with themselves. That's what actually happened. So this was something you can investigate, but ultimately, if you're seeking power, real power, and I do believe I've come into an understanding lately that everybody is seeking the same thing. It's just that we distort it because we're negative or we have belief systems that block us. That's the wall. That's the wailing wall for sure. But we don't see it because we're blinded. Remember the blind spot test? We can't see it because we think we're right. And see, when you have that mentality that you're right, you block out everything. So you're not actually able to see. You can't find a way out. But I'm offering in this video a way out, which is to thine own self be true, which is to recalibrate militaries into some form of New Earth type armies. Wouldn't it be amazing if that actually happened in Israel, given that Jesus arose from that part of the world, which was the love-based consciousness? Can you imagine if actually the military, who are the Israeli people, of course, they all have to go in there and serve their time. But wouldn't it be great if they learnt to be a force for peace? Make friends with the Palestinians. Stop fighting them. You're never going to get rid of them, really. You only anchor them there, but the more you fight them. And in the eyes of the world, people won't be sort of sympathetic. The world is not out to get you. The world is actually out to love you. But you're blocking that love. So anyway, that was just a feeling. Obviously, I was meant to go there again and express this. I'm just wondering whether there's anything else I can offer whilst I'm in this space. Okay, I've just found on my blog a United Nations World Peace Plan. What's my statement at the front here? Anything is possible when it's possible to be anything. We are one. Now, this is actually from Robert Mueller, which is a great name. This is the other Robert Mueller. He actually is a visionary. So let me read. This is dedicated to the beautiful Israeli military. This is also dedicated to Mossad, the United States, and its various intelligence organizations. This is dedicated to you. For my wish is your peace, actually. And I will always love unconditionally everyone, because I know you're doing your best based on what you think. So let's have a look at Robert Mueller. This is a first statement from Eleanor Roosevelt. For it isn't enough to talk about peace, one must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it, one must work for it. So she was the wife of President Roosevelt, US, Eleanor Roosevelt. So the first point he makes is a new Marshall Plan should be created to help the poor countries, hence UNESCO. Premium aid, debt reduction and debt forgiveness are granted to countries that disarm and demilitarize under UN protection and guarantees. A series of engineering and power projects are implemented with savings from disarmament and demilitarization to improve the productivity, efficiency and environmental impact of the world economy. Nuclear-free zones, peace zones and demilitarized areas should be established, guaranteed by the UN, accompanied by premium economic aid. Now this would be untied aid. The world's religions should put an end to all religious conflicts to support peace, disarmament and demilitarization, to cooperate on a world spirituality and to draft in common a world code of ethics and cosmology to guide governments and world agencies within the larger framework of the universe and eternity. Wow, that's a great statement. The United Nations should create a world spiritual agency which brings the resources, visions and wisdom of the spiritual traditions to bear upon world problems. That is a terrific idea and very bravely written by Robert Mueller. A world spiritual agency. So this is really bringing in the spirit of humanity together, really. 4, the Marshall Plan for the dramatic improvement of the standards of living of the poor countries, drafted by the UN Economic and Social Council, is endorsed by the General Assembly and put into operation. 5, World Summit meetings should be held annually between all heads of state. The G7 just popped into my mind, G8. That's something to consider, I think. So point 1 is they decide to chart a new course for humanity and the Earth, a global renaissance, a new planetary deal, unfolding better ways to administer properly and peacefully our magnificent planet. 2, they agreed a total nuclear disarmament by the year, this is 2010, let's make it by the year 2020. I'll just change the dates. And total disarmament and demilitarization by the year 2030. May have to be earlier than that because of climate change. Let's say 2020. I think 2020 is probably a good point because it's 2 years away. They agreed to stop all arms sales. And this is what's, I think, leading this exodus from the UNESCO. And call for a United Nations conference on the worldwide prohibition of arms sales and production. So the UN, of course, there are members in the UN Security Council selling small arms as well. It's got to stop. You can't be saying you are representing the globe and you're here to ensure peace and security when you're selling arms. Can't happen. But then people will say, well, how do we protect ourselves? Well, I talked about the New Earth Army. That's a starting point. You have to find peace within. You have to have the courage to face situations, but people would say we can't disarm. Maybe over a graduated period of time we can, as we get more secure, more confident that we can actually resolve conflict without weapons. I think the global community needs to learn that we can actually do it without weapons. Okay, new world priorities are set to be implemented with the huge resources released by disarmament and demilitarization. Now, these are massive resources that because it's an industry now, this is very problematic because they'll resist change. High technology video and sound communication systems are established between the offices and the homes of heads of state in order that they can remain in direct, instantaneous communication at any time on any crisis, problem, idea, proposal, or action for peace and a better world. Well, we can do that anyway now. But what Robert is saying here is that this is really instantaneous, so we can just pick up, make a Skype call or whatever. The US scraps all Star Wars plans and research. It's a good idea. The US ratifies the UN Law of the Sea, which creates legal order for the largest world commons, the seas and oceans, which cover 71% of the planet. And of course, there is information on the net stating that the oceans will be fished out by 2050. That's a real problem. A group of experts is appointed jointly by the heads of state to draft proposals for a quantum jump in the role and resources of the UN system to enable it to deal effectively with global problems confronting humanity at an accelerated pace. So essentially, the UN needs to be strengthened. And rather than countries defaulting on payments, there needs to be a commitment to a United Nations that I think, this is my viewpoint, it has to have some form of democratic frame, but it doesn't have to be Western. And so for those countries who don't think in that way, but a framework where we respect each other's voices, I think, is really critical. I think conflict resolution is the framework, actually. Maybe not democracy, but maybe we have a framework for conflict resolution so they can communicate better and resolve conflict. 9, a UN specialised agency on population is created. The US renews its support to the UN Fund for Population Activities and increases tenfold its contribution to it. I'm just going to do an aside with UNESCO, with a few people dropping out of it, or a few countries dropping out of it. With education comes a fall in population. So this business of we rejecting, in a sense, any agencies engaged in trying to embed education around the world with a peace theme is actually going to slow our progress considerably. We need to be productive and proactive. The UN World Meteorological Organization is transformed into the World Climate Organization. 11. Following the path-breaking reports of the eminent persons on North-South relations, the Brandt Report on Disarmament and Our Common Future, the Palm Report on Environment and Development, the Brundtland Report, 3 further groups of eminent persons are established. 12. Seems to be something missing there. Well, on the elimination of all forms of violence in human society. Yeah, this is to do with the 3 further groups. Okay, I can see I've done a little error here. 3 further groups of eminent persons are established. 1, on the elimination of all forms of violence in human society. 2, on a new world deal for humanity, including world priorities. 3, on a proper, peaceful, just world government and the creation of a true world community that encompasses the European Union and new regional communities for Africa, America, Asia, and the Middle East. The UN General Assembly takes 6 major steps. 1, in consultation with governments, world agencies, and the best minds of the planet, I'd say best hearts, it prepares a plan for world peace for the year 2020. All member states are requested to submit proposals. National committees are established for people's participation to draft ideas and concrete action proposals towards world peace, we'll say 2020, and world disarmament and demilitarization 2030. Even though I said before 2020, they need more time to disarm. So we have to de-escalate the fear which is causing the armament. 2, the General Assembly requests that all existing UN plans, food, health and economic development decades, be put together into a world action plan. The Assembly calls for the rapid solution of all remaining conflicts to enable humanity to proceed with a clean slate. A worldwide ceasefire is proclaimed under UN control. That could be a starting point. 3, if it decides to abolish the Trusteeship Council, which has completed its work, and to replace it with the Environmental Security Council, as proposed by Russia. That's where the real security is in the environment. The failure to resolve all these conflicts means that people are staying with thought forms that don't serve them. 4, the Assembly decides to create the 60th, this was going back to 2005. Let's see what it's saying. They're celebrating 60th anniversary. So maybe we look at other anniversaries of the UN as focal points for celebration to keep the momentum going. 4, a Third World Conference on the Environment and Development is organised to adopt a bold World Environment Action Plan. We have to coordinate, you see. The United Nations Environmental Programme becomes a specialised agency with vastly increased resources, including tax on environmentally detrimental activities. Well, we're still driving cars around, aren't we? Because we've got class systems in place, people can't afford, vehicles that are, So the dual capacity vehicles, where we're working off either solar, working off very low carbon fuels, maybe even magnets, using them for momentum. There are different ways of creating momentum without using fossil fuels. So it says here, and a UN outer space agency is created as proposed by Austria. Eminent thinkers meet, and feelers, I have to add, because we can't just be here, we've got to be in the heart. Meet during the year to draft a world constitution. Provisions are made for the world democracy, world elections, world public opinion polls, and referenda to give people a direct voice in the world affairs, a step rendered possible by modern communication technologies. That's essential. We definitely need a world constitution and people having a direct voice. We can do that with technology now. The UN Security Council meets several times a year at the heads of states level to review the world political and security situation, to settle disputes, finalise agreements, and initiate further action. The Security Council meets in various cities in the world to be closer to the people, especially the troubled areas. 16. The summit meeting of Eastern, Western and non-aligned countries are replaced by a yearly World Summit meeting of all heads of state, preceded by regional summit meetings, African, American, Asian, European, Middle Eastern. 17. A World Conference on Security remains in session, like the Law of the Sea Conference did, until it hammers out a proper world security system. 18. The Military Staff Committee on the Security Council meets at the Chiefs of Staff's level and undertakes 3 tasks. 1, I love this, plans a world disarmament agency. 2, adopts immediate measures to prevent a nuclear war. There are other players involved in this which will help as well, but that's another story. 3, implements worldwide military cooperation in multiple fields, starting with the creation of a UN fleet to patrol the seas and oceans and a UN satellite system to monitor disarmament as proposed by France. Good on you, France. 19. Direct video and teleconferencing systems are set up between heads of state, especially members of the Security Council and the Secretary General. 20. The Secretary General's Office for Conflict Information and Prevention is strengthened. A peace room is set up at the UN to prevent, track, contain and solve conflicts in any place on Earth. UN offices are established in each capital. So this is what needs to happen. The people like in Burma being run out of their own country, the Rohingya, and the Karen in the forests and the various other ethnic issues. That needs to be dealt with immediately. We don't just let them go. There has to be concerted universal effort brought to bear on situations where people are put in harm's way. We can't just say at the local level that we believe in health and safety, but at the international level, oh, well, it's not our jurisdiction. Well, through the UN, it needs to be strengthened. And they need to be people recruited on the basis of a true humanitarian background. Not necessarily all the qualifications. We need a diversity in the UN of people coming from very different walks of life in order to be able to offer insights into how to solve these very complicated problems. Because it's not going to happen overnight, obviously. 21. 4 additional world conferences are held. 1, a World Conference of Scientists from environmental fields, oceanography, atmospheric science, hydrology, climatology, biology, deforestation, radiation, immunology, toxicity, etc. 2, a World Conference of Education Ministers to adopt measures for urgent environmental education in all countries. of the planet. 3, a world conference on voluntary simplicity and frugality. Hey, live like me. To address overconsumption, greed, garbage, unnecessary waste, and planned obsolescence. 4, a 4th World Conference on women. Definitely, we've had the Me Too stuff. This is a real phenomenon. Women are finding their voice, which is great. 5, a World Conference on the future of humanity. 6, a World Conference on the future of the Earth. These are great subjects. I'd love to be there. 22, the Conference on World Security completes its work and submits a treaty for the ratification of member states. The military staff committees submit to the Assembly a blueprint for a world disarmament agency as part of the treaty. 23, a majority of countries change the name of their ministries of foreign affairs to ministries of peace. Yes. Or ministries of world affairs and cooperation, and I might add maybe even a ministry of conflict resolution. But peace is great too. That's been resisted, that thought. There was a Department of Peace back in 1986, International Year of Peace. I knew a woman who was on that committee, and the idea was to focus on peace, not militarism. So Department of Peace, how do we build relations between countries? How do we create friendship? Patch Adams, the famous clown doctor who I went to Russia with, talks about friendshipism. Got to get to know each other. Stop demonising each other through small groups doing X, Y, Z. We decide the whole country is the same. Well, they're not. We need to get to know people. We need to build relationships. Trade, of course, has done that, but trade is also, through its profit motive, is also separating people. It's also disempowering people too, as we've seen with the industrial military. You know, this is the profiting through military action. We don't want that. When you profit out of it, you will do everything in your power to keep it expanding. And if it's destroying the planet, then it's a zero-sum game if we go in that direction. So the military has to be invited into this. The industrial military have to be invited into this to see the reality on the ground. Your children and grandchildren that you're playing dice with, you know, do you really want that? You have to get real. It's not a them and us. You've got to break out of that mindset. Maybe there's ways that those skills and talents can be utilised in other ways. 24. More and more nations celebrate the world days proclaimed by the UN, such as Earth Day, International Day of Peace, UN Day, Human Rights Day, World Health Day, World Food Day, International Children's Day, International Women's Day, and the Day of the Elderly. I love that. National War Memorial Days, so you're all invited to, are shifted to UN days. Okay, so we're bringing them in. A symbol of hope and rebirth from all past wars. Monuments to known and unknown peacemakers. Oh, I like that. Peace parks and peace museums are created in many places. National hymns are rewritten in peaceful global terms. You see, people won't like that, but the thing is there are a lot of peacemakers that have gone unacknowledged who have actually shown great courage in the face of very difficult circumstances, Gandhi being one. Peacemakers like Mother Teresa, she was a peacemaker. And Aung San Suu Kyi, despite common rhetoric today, she's another peacemaker. She does the best she can. She's in a very difficult spot. The elders, if you look them up on the internet, they're also past peacemakers. Various business leaders like Richard Branson, he's a peace builder. They're all out there and we need to focus on that. 25, a World Peace Service is created allowing young people to do world service in developing countries and world agencies in lieu of the abolished military service. I think that's good. Wouldn't it be great to get the Israeli kids into peace building and finding ways to de-escalate the violence over the border using alternative forms that work. 26, the commissions of the future are created in the UN General Assembly and in all UN specialised agencies. Ministers of the future are created. That's really great in all governments. We had that here in Australia, Commission for the Future. That's probably come from here, maybe. Yeah, that was good old Barry Jones, who passed away. I was very disappointed when I heard about that. He was the science minister here. I met him, actually. Great guy. Heard him speak quite a few times. A lot of wisdom. But when I was studying economics, he was talking about the Commission of the Future. They were trying to develop that here in Australia, but unfortunately, we have the other side, or other sides, they're on both sides, but there are conservative elements that shut down these visionaries because they don't want to see the change. They see it as a threat to their power, sadly. As a result of these steps, governments begin to realise that world peace is possible. An entirely new period of human history can begin, marked by synergistic cooperation. Yes. In a world society no longer stifled by national sovereignty. Robert Mueller is one of the leading peacemakers and visionaries on our planet. He's passed over now. He was the former UN Under-Secretary General to 3 UN Secretary Generals who initiated 12 of the 32 agencies' world programs during his 37 years in the UN. Pretty amazing. The UN often gets a lot of criticism, but I think it's pretty amazing that it is in existence and still going. He was the co-founder of the University of Peace in Costa Rica, which I wanted to go and visit. I'm just going to check him out for a second. Robert Mueller. I'm pretty sure he's no longer with us. Yes, he died in 2010 after he wrote that. He was an international civil servant with the United Nations, Assistant Secretary General for 40 years. And his ideas about world government, world peace and spirituality led to increased representation of religions in the UN, especially the New Age movement. Oh, I like him. I'm just checking this out on Wikipedia. He was known by some as the philosopher of the United Nations. Oh, how's that? I felt inspired to look at him. I'm a philosopher too. He was born in Belgium. Good old Robert. He grew up in France as a French citizen. His childhood home was on the border. Border issues he saw as a child had significant impact on his life. So this is the border of France and Germany. His decision to work at the UN, it also was why he decided to work there. During his youth, Robert Mueller experienced constant political and cultural turmoil. He knew the horrors of World War II, of being a refugee of the Nazi occupation in France, imprisonment and escape from prison. During the war, he was a member of the French resistance, where towards the end of the war, he unsuccessfully tried to prevent the slaughter of a group of captured German soldiers. See, I had a message for the Israelis here. How's that? He was subjugated by the Germans, but he also protected them. This was a major life event that led to work for peace. After the war, he returned home and earned a doctorate of law from the University of Strasbourg. In 1948, he entered and won an essay contest on how to govern the world, the prize of which was an internship at the newly created UN. So he's been there from the beginning. So let me go back. I have to find my article now. Here we go. Oh, that was another one. Let's go back. I've got unconditional love. I'm going through all my tabs. Love is reality. Standing on the pier of my life. Just going through the path of conflict resolution changes the climate. This was the UNESCO one I was trying to record before. Let's have a look. I've gone all the way through this. I hope I didn't close it. Let's have a look. Did I close it? Oh, no, I didn't. Here it is. So we've just had a little bit of a quick look at him. Now, he died after writing this. So let's just finish this off. We got to the University of Peace in Costa Rica, which I wanted to go to. I wish I'd gone now. Margaret Mead called him the most brilliant man that had ever served in the UN. He has dedicated his life to peace and healing the planet. Anyone who has ever heard Robert speak will never forget him or the great soul that he was. So there's a few websites here. Good Morning World, www.goodmorningworld.org. I'll just see if it's there. Good Morning World. I like that. Does it exist? Site can't be reached, so it doesn't look like it's there anymore. What a shame. Okay. There's also Robert Mueller, www.robertmueller.org. I'm going to check that one out as well. Just curious to see if they're there. Yes. Oh, I love this. Wow. Robert Mueller. Most of all, they taught me happiness. Yes. He's got decide two poems. Decide to be happy, to be healthy, to be peaceful, to be spiritual, to be thankful, to forgive, to open yourself, to laugh, to ask, to network, to do at least one good action a day, to be human, to be blessed, to be good. Decide never to be negative. Oh, wow. Decide to be cheerful. Decide to look out. Decide to write. Decide two poems for a better world. Yes, I can do that. Decide to be a global citizen. Decide to dream. Wow. I'm going to check him out more. Now, here we've got the Good Morning blogs. They're here on his website. So that's www.robertmueller.org. I'm going to earmark that. Wow. This is very interesting because what I'm reading, he wrote for this time. There's also the Decide two poems, and we've got it here. So, Prophet, the hat maker's son, so he was obviously the son of a hat maker, Robert Mueller's exciting biography is an epic tale about how two world wars resulted in the birth of the United Nations. Outstanding and highly recommended. Well, there you have it. I think that's a great thing. Now, he wrote that in 2010 and then he died. So he was here for that point in time. Message today is for the Israelis, definitely. The world is going to shift. You're either working in harmony with this shift or you're not. And that's okay. Freedom to choose. But the world is going to choose differently. We're choosing peace. We're over it. Everyone's over it. We want a peaceful world. We're sick of all the money getting sunk into things that are non-productive. For the sake of the few who want to make a lot of money. Sorry, it's selfish, and we love you and we want you on board. Same with the Americans. You can't isolate yourself and build walls, mate. It doesn't work. Don't go that way. Look at Robert Mueller. He's your teacher. Okay? I send this with great love. And that, again, our happy destiny is unavoidable. Absolutely. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Create peace where you are. Have fun. Bye.